Hi, today's notes are on 9.4c, and we're going to be graphing sine and cosine functions, but we're adding more translations, both vertical and horizontal, and reflections. We've already talked about vertical and horizontal stretches and shrinks, which were the amplitude and the period, right? So those are already embedded. So let's do a quick review. We're going to sketch one period of each parent function. Remember that sine starts at the midline, and it has a period of 2 pi, so it's going to come back to the same place. I'm going to go up, back to 0, down to the minimum, back to 0. The domain is all real numbers, and the range, right, like this will go on, and the range is from -1 to 1. Cosine starts at the max, and after a period of 2 pi, it's going to come back to the same point. And so I'm going to go down to the midline, to the minimum, back to midline, and up to the top. Oops, sorry, missed a little there. Okay. And then let's do a quick review of amplitude and period shifts. So there's no shift in the midline so far. Oh, we did. Sorry, we did do that one. So here's my k. And the k value is your midline, which is 4. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Draw my horizontal midline here. We're going to go an amplitude of 3. And for the max, we're going to go midline plus 3. And for the mid, we're going to go minimum, midline minus 3. Okay, so it'll be up to 7 and down to 1. So for the midpoint, up 3 and 1. Just going to draw those in as it'll be easier to see everything at that point. Okay. We don't have a phase shift, no horizontal shift yet, so that's going to be x equals 0 or none. That means we're going to start right here. Sine starts at the midline. Which means we're going to start in the middle. Now we do need to figure out the period, which is 2 pi divided by b. b is 2. This is a for amplitude. So 2 pi divided by 2 is just pi. So here's my first period. I'm going to travel back here. And distance between critical points is just divide by 4. Right? So it'll be pi over 4. So now I have to put in counting by pi over 4. Here's half. Here's pi over 4. Okay. And so I'm going to go up to the maximum point first, back to the midline, down to the minimum, and back to our original midline starting point. Yeah. I am going to start to extend. So I'm counting by every 2 down here. And so I'm going to continue my graph just to show that it goes up, down, all the way to the end of the graph. Okay. Cycles in 2 pi is a 2 pi divided by the period. So I'm going to have 2 pi divided by pi, which means I'm going to have 2 cycles in 2 pi, which we can see going up, down, that's 1, and here's the second one. Critical points. Okay, for our critical point, we are starting at 0, 4. My x values are counting by the distance between critical points. So pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and then 4 pi over 4 is pi. Okay, and then the y values of each of these is just going from midline up to max. Midline is 4, max is 7, midline, minimum, and then back to midline. Okay, so hopefully that was a good review. The only difference I could do is start with cosine, which means that you start at the maximum instead of starting at the minimum. Okay. Or the midline, sorry. So let's talk about vertical and horizontal translations. I think I just did one, right? So this is your vertical translation, which was k. And the horizontal translation, we now have to figure this out before we can graph. But all the other values stay the same. So let's find our midline. The midline is your vertical, sorry, let's write that on the side. Your vertical shift, right? Because it starts at 0, and if I move up and down, amplitude is A. So let's see. My midline now is going to be -3. Amplitude is 4. From -3 plus 4, we'll have 1. And -3 minus 4 will be at -7. Everything is still the same here. 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, that's -7. And here's 1. Okay, so the period we can still figure out using 2 pi over b. B should technically be an absolute value. Sorry, I didn't add that earlier. Okay, so I'm going to go 2 pi. This b value is 1/2. So that's the same as times 2 times 2. So it'll be 4 pi. Okay. So let's label that. Then our distance between critical points is divided by 4. So that'll be pi. Show my work. Okay, and the number of cycles in 2 pi is going to be 2 pi over period, which was 4 pi. So it'll be 2 pi over 4 pi, which is 1/2. So we know then that this is a horizontal stretch because the fraction has a reciprocal, right? It's a horizontal stretch of 2. Our phase shift, this is the new one for today. This is your h value, right? So it's the x minus h. So remember, you have to switch your signs. So it looks like a negative, but we're going to say x equals positive pi. I'll write here opposite signs. And so we need to find where pi is, because we're going to go plus pi. This is plus pi to the right. Okay. So since pi is here, this is going to be my new y-axis. Okay, I'm going to shift. So instead of starting at cosine, which is at your maximum at 0, 1, we're going to shift it pi to the right, and we're going to start right here. Then we're going to count by pi's. And so now I know that after distance between critical points is pi, so I'm going to go down to the midline after pi, all the way down to the minimum, back to the midline, and then up to the top, to the maximum value. And so this shifted curve is the one that I want you to write the critical points for, because I want this critical point to be the first shifted point. These numbers we know are going to continue this way, right? And so the graph continues, just like it does here. But this shifted period, those 5 points are the ones I want here. So we're going to start at pi in the x-axis, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, and 5 pi. And then my y values are going to be starting at the maximum, right, because it's cosine. So I'm going to start at the top. It'll be at 1, -3, and -7, -3 again, and then back to 1. Okay? So we're really only adding one thing here, which is our horizontal shift. One last example, and then you have 2 U-try problems. So steps 1 through 3 are the exact same, but when we have a reflection over the x-axis, for cosine, we're going to start at the minimum instead of the maximum, right? Because instead, say, of looking at this graph, if I reflect everything over the midline, you are going to have to start at the bottom instead of at the top, okay? For sine, the difference is we start at the bottom, or in the middle, sorry, but instead of going up, we go down. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay. So take a moment and see if you can fill this all in yourself. I'll show a little less work this time. Amplitude is still 3, even though it says -3. Okay. So we're going to go 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 minus 3 is -1. Okay. The period, notice this is already factored out, so this is B and this is H. If there isn't a factored out B value, you have to factor it out. Okay, that'll be the next level. So this is a 2 pi over 2, that means my period is pi still. Oh, and so the distance between critical points divided by 4 will be pi over 4. That's a lot smaller, so that's each one of these. Okay, so we're going to have a very small period. Let's see. Number of cycles in 2 pi is 2 pi divided by the period, which is 2. Our phase shift is our h value, but with the opposite sign, so it'll be negative pi over 2. And so guys, notice that negative pi over 2 to the left means I'm going to go 2 to the left. 1, 2. Ooh. Sorry, didn't draw that in. So here's my new y-axis. Shift it. And if we are graphing sine, then I'm going to start at the midline here, but I'm going to go down instead of up. Ooh, sorry, down here. Back up. This is going to be a tiny, very narrow graph. Okay, so I'm going to go every pi over 4. We're going to have a critical point. So it's going to be pretty squished. That's our first graph. And then you guys on a test would have to extend it. Okay, that's my, sorry, I know it's a pain in the butt. But I want you guys also to get really good at coming back to the midline always, right? So just know that it's always going to come back to the midline. I'm going to skip that for right now. Okay, so let's write our critical points. Please don't start at 0 here. We're going to start at our shifted x value, which is negative pi over 2. Then we have negative pi over 4 as our next point. We have 0. Sorry about that. Pi over 4, and then pi over 2. Okay, confirm that that's where our period ends, right there. And then we go from our midpoint, which is 2, down to -1. Oh, sorry, that's not at 2. Oh, no, it is. Sorry. 2 down to -1, up to 2, all the way up to 5, and then back to 2. So the next 2 are for you to try. How can you check your graphs to see if they are correct? Well, if you do a quick Desmos.com graph, you can do a quick check to see if you're heading in the right direction. You might need to play with it a little to see the x value counting by the right number, but you should at least be able to tell starting at 0, 0, like, did you shift your graph up, down, right, left, and does it go up or down from 0? Okay. We'll practice more in class. That's it for today.